Chet, this memo of yours takes a lot for granted, it seems to me. You say you think your article ought to be the lead story in next month's issue. Give me one good reason why.
Look, Chief, what our readers want is news about cars, right?
Shag?
And I'm an automobile writer with a nose for news, right?
That's your story.
No, sir. My story is about the 58 Plymouth. Its engine, transmission, and chassis make the best news that car buyers will hear this year.
Okay, Hemingway. Go ahead and prove it.
That's why I brought Roy along, Chief. Wait till you see the shots he got.
Uh-huh. The demon photographer.
You'll get an eye full. Show him the first one, Roy.
What, an engine?
Right you are. But not just an ordinary engine, Chief. This is the brand new Golden Commando. 305 horsepower.
305?
You heard it right. And 350 cubic inches.
What's the bore and stroke?
The bore is 4 6/100 inches, and the stroke is 3 38/100 inches.
Hey, Chet, what's that supposed to mean?
Read my article where I call it an over-square engine. That means the bore is wider than the distance the piston travels up or down, so it develops more power with less friction. There's less wasted energy.
Compression ratio?
10-to-1 compression ratio, Chief. And I'd call that another measure of Plymouth efficiency. It shows how much the fuel charge is squeezed or compressed in the combustion chamber before it's fired. Here's what I'd like to do. We could use a spring to show what that kind of compression ratio means. It's like squeezing a spring down to 1/10 its normal size and then releasing it. Whammo! There's an idea of why this big Plymouth Golden Commando gets more power out of every charge of fuel.
Not bad.
And look at these extra-large valves, Chief. There's another example of what an over-square engine design will do for you. The large bore of this engine means plenty of room for both intake and exhaust valves, so they can be extra large.
So what's good about large valves?
Look, large valves can do a faster job of taking fuel in and pushing the exhaust out, so they can give you better performance under all conditions. Big valves are another measure of Plymouth efficiency.
All right, let's get on with it.
Okay. Take a look at the deep block design on this Golden Commando. You see how deep it is? It actually extends 3 full inches below the center of the crankshaft. I call this a deep skirt block, and what it does is provide really solid support for the crankshaft and main journals, so you get a true running, long-life crankshaft.
More important than that, it ought to give better support to the torque converter, too.
Chief, you sure hit the nail on the head, and I cover that point in my story. The torque converter bolts directly to the end of the block, so you get a rigid engine and transmission unit. She'll idle smooth and accelerate without vibration.
Has it got a 4-hole pot?
How's that again, Chief?
4-barrel carburetor.
Look, the Golden Commando has not one, but two 4-barrel carburetors. They have a new design to deliver a smooth flow of power under all sorts of driving conditions, including sharp turns. And, by the way, look. When you get this special high-performance engine, you get a special high-performance chassis. It has special heavy-duty torsion bars, shock absorbers, and rear springs. It has wider wheels and tires, and other parts are special for the Golden Commando, too.
Pretty powerful package. What's the availability?
The Golden Commando is optional on any Plymouth, from the Fury right down to the Plaza.
What's the bread and butter engine for Plymouth?
The Fury V800, which is bread and butter plus lots of jam. This was the 57 Fury engine. Now, with carburation changes, it's the standard V8 in every Plymouth. It's got 225 horsepower, which is a lot for a standard V8 in the low-price field. The compression ratio is 9-to-1. The 2-barrel carburetor is standard.
Is there a power pack?
Yep, the Fury V800 with Super Pack. It puts out 250 horsepower. It has a 4-barrel carburetor, dual pipes, a high-performance distributor, and a high-performance camshaft. The Fury model has a dual Fury V800 engine at 290 horsepower. It has a higher compression ratio, 9.25-to-1. It also has a dual breaker distributor, a special high-performance cam, dual exhausts, and 2 4-barrel carburetors. Fury buyers like performance, and they'll get it with this job. And everybody likes economy, so Plymouth...
Everybody talks economy, but nobody does much about it.
That's where Plymouth is different. Every Plymouth engine has a new automatic choke that's a lot more sensitive to temperature changes. Look at this chart. This shows the results of road tests on the new automatic choke. On a series of 2-mile warm-up runs, it saved 5 miles a gallon. On 5-mile runs, it saved 3 miles a gallon. On 15-mile runs, it saved 1.5 miles a gallon.
Hey, there's some real savings.
You bet, especially when you figure that most driving is done in short trips. In winter, a car may not get warmed up very often, but in a Plymouth, that won't be expensive.
Say, will these engines run roughly? Some of these hot jobs shudder and roll when they idle.
Well, Plymouth won't. Give me that engine mount shot, Roy. All the Plymouth V8s are suspended from the front mounts. Hanging the engine from soft rubber mounts makes it quiet and smooth. And that's no ordinary mount the engine hangs on. I got one here with the top removed. This is the way it sets in the engine compartment. The engine hangs in rubber, with the bulk of the rubber at the top of the mount where it can absorb the vibrations. You'll notice there's no metal-to-metal contact. Now, Chief, the next thing I take up in the story is the transmission, because I think torque flight is typical of Plymouth leadership.
That's a pretty big statement.
Check the facts. Torque flight is tops in torque multiplication, yet it's smooth and economical. It helped Plymouth win its class in the Mobile gas economy run last year. Performance, smoothness, economy. Any transmission that can give you all three is a good transmission. What's more, torque flight will be available across the board on every Plymouth V8.
How about power flight?
That'll be available on every Plymouth except the Fury.
Hey, Chief, check these Plymouth push buttons. Man, those I like.
You bet. And only Plymouth in the low-priced field will have push buttons in 1958.
Maybe you got a lead story here after all.
Leadership story, Chief, and you've only heard half of it.
How about this new Sure Grip differential? Got any dope on that?
You bet. Got it all covered in my story. Let me show you how we could illustrate what can happen with a conventional differential. When one wheel is on a slippery surface, practically all the power goes to it, so it just spins. And even if the other wheel is on a dry surface, it doesn't get enough power to pull you out. But Plymouth's Sure Grip differential will make the stationary wheel on the dry pavement turn along with the slipping wheel and pull you out. It's all automatic, trouble-free, and foolproof.
Boy, that's for me.
Yeah, foolproof.
Now we come to one of the most important parts of the story. Torsion air ride.
That's not news.
No, but the fact that nobody else is going to match it is news. Torsion air will give you the finest combination of comfort, control, and safety. Plymouth is still the only car in its field to have torsion bar springs. This scale model Plymouth they gave me has working torsion springs. Push down on the wheel and you can watch the bars twist. Pretty neat, huh?
Yeah, they really work.
In our story, I want to include a picture of the torsion springs in the front suspension, along with an explanation of how they work. Just like twisting a piece of rubber hose in your two hands and feeling it untwist. Then I'd like to get in a sketch of the rear suspension. Nobody else has anything like this, you know. I mean, with the axle mounted well forward on the rear springs. That way, you get a short, stiff section to hold the axle and the whole car steady and straight. That's what helps the Plymouth start flat without squatting. And it helps Plymouth stop flat without dipping. And it helps the Plymouth stay flat on turns, too.
The front part of the springs do all that?
Yep.
Well, what's left for the back parts?
Why, in this Plymouth design, the rear part is extra long and extra springy for an extra soft ride over the bumps. Your pictures show the comfort of this car. I want to use them to top off the torsion air story. These pictures show a Plymouth taking some really rugged bumps without bottoming or pitching or jouncing. Auraflow shock absorbers do a big job here, too. They really snub the bounce out of the bumps. And in 1958, all station wagons get rear springs that are 2 inches longer because the Suburbans are longer than the other models. That's putting the extra springiness right where the comfort comes from. All other Plymouth V8s get an extra leaf to help handle the extra torque that'll come out of the new engines.
Okay, so far so good. Now you're claiming Plymouth is a hot car. But what about the air suspension system that Ford and Chevrolet will have?
Okay, let's check it out. In the first place, it's really air springs, not air suspension. All they do is replace the steel springs with bags of air.
That isn't good?
Not particularly. The airbags won't do a thing to make the car corner flat or stop flat or start flat. All the things torsion air is famous for. In fact, you can expect the Chevrolet to be a little worse in handling.
How come?
Well, you know how a Buick handles, kind of bouncy. We proved that in last year's road tests. And just like a Buick, a standard Chevrolet without air springs will have coil springs in the rear, like Buick has had for years. And you know how Buicks act when it comes to control.
Well, air springs must do something.
Sure, air springs will take the sharp edge off bumps, but look. These comparison tests we ran on the 57 show they have a lot of edge to take off before they match Plymouth. Matter of fact, a lot of the Plymouth advantage you see here comes from Oriflow shock absorbers and synchronized springing. Two features Chevrolet and Ford still won't have in 58. Of course, the air springs will level off the car automatically when 5 or 6 people get in. For this feature, air springs will cost maybe $150 or $200 extra. And torsion air is standard on every Plymouth.
Good point. Now, what about this new power steering you mentioned in the memo?
They call it constant control power steering, Chief, and it's all new, except that it retains all the advantages of full-time power steering. By that I mean it goes into action to provide steering help with the slightest turn of the steering wheel. It gives true full-time steering help. Here's a comparison of the new 1958 constant control power steering with the old one. You can see by the dotted lines how the new unit puts all the works under the floorboard. Last year's unit increased the diameter of the steering column. Now the steering column is thin, with more footroom between the steering column and the pedals. The new full-time unit is simpler, so there'll be less need for service. And if it does need service, it's easier to get at.
Okay, but will the driver feel any difference?
I drove it, and the new unit gives you a firmer feel on the highway. You know, a solid sense of control.
Chief, wait till you hear about the Plymouth brakes. Boy,
Well, aren't they the same as in 1957?
Except for a harder brake lining, they are the same, which means they're still ahead of the other cars. And I think folks will want to know why. And the basic reason is very simple. Plymouth brakes are built so the shoes make total contact with the drum every time the driver puts on the brakes. Like the way my fist contacts my hand. Total contact. Other brake shoes can tilt to one side, like this, so one edge doesn't make full contact. Plymouth shoes can't do that. When other brakes get hot and the drum expands, the shoe doesn't make full contact. Plymouth shoes can follow the drum and make total contact under the same conditions. Add to that the fact that Plymouth brake shoes have more lining than the others in its price class, and you can see why a Plymouth can stop faster, can stop in a straight line, can stop safely, when other brakes would fade because of heat. What's more...
Hey, don't forget to tell them about reline jobs.
You mean no reline jobs?
This gets confusing.
It's simple, Chief. Plymouth brake shoes make total contact with the drum, so the lining wears evenly, which means it will last a lot longer. And those linings are bonded to the shoe so they can be worn right down to the shoe itself. Some cars have riveted linings. The rivets cut down the usable thickness.
Yeah, I like that. We're getting a lot of letters to the editor about maintenance costs. Good point.
You can see why I got all excited about the new Plymouth. This car has got the engineering leadership, Chief. I know. They let me drive one while Roy took some pictures. They say there's no catching Plymouth, and with the Golden Commando, that's a fact. And for smooth shifting, I'll take Torque Flight. It's not only smooth, but it winds up that engine for plenty of go, too, especially at passing speeds. I took one test car through a special course to check driving control. Believe me, Torsion Air is the answer to combining big car comfort with sports car handling. And braking. Those total contact brakes make Plymouth the safest high-performance car on the road. It's a hot car, Chief. It's making very hot news.
It ought to be the lead story.
Seems like you guys are pretty cocksure about selling me on using this for the lead story. Hello, composing room. Hey, Joe, pull out that article on Ford and Chevy. I'm sending down a story on the new Plymouth. That's right. It's going to be the lead story in our book.
Don't forget to subscribe for more, and check out the over 100 other videos from GM, Ford, and Chrysler.